Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NCEA's Marzanos Essential 9 webinar. My name is Kate Reich, and I am the organizer for today's event, and am on hand to help with any technical questions that you may have as we go through the webinar. Before we begin, I do have some housekeeping matters to share with you. First, please know that all of your microphone connections with today's webinar have been muted. During the presentation, you may ask questions or provide comments for the presenter by using the chat or the question functions located in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. We're also inviting you to open up a link to todaysmeet.com/essential9webinar. That's also a great place for you to ask questions or engage in dialogue with some of the other attendees. However, if you'd like to use the GoToWebinar question function, be sure to click the question bubble, click into the blank box area, and enter your question using your keyboard, and then click Send. I just sent the link for todaysmeet.com through the chat or question bubble, so you can access it there. Secondly, the webinar presentation will run for 45 minutes, leaving some time at the end for the presenter to answer any questions that you provide. Third, today's webinar will feature 2 polls. To answer the poll questions, use your mouse to make your selection, then click Submit. Fourth, you will be asked to complete a brief evaluation at the end of this webinar, and your feedback is greatly appreciated. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and you will all receive a copy of the final recorded webinar that we will email to you once we have the recorded file available. I'm very pleased to present Kathy Mears, Executive Director of the NCEA Elementary Schools Department. Kathy comes to the NCEA from the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, where she was the Assistant Superintendent for Catholic Schools. She has been both a teacher and a principal in Catholic elementary schools and brings extensive experience in special education, public policy, school improvement programs, and professional development. Please welcome Kathy.
Thank you. Very kind introduction. I appreciate it very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Or if you're on the West Coast, good afternoon. We are so glad you are here. Again, as Kate said, if you can go to today's meet, it's a great place for you to put questions. It's very easy for me to see that on my iPad, so it helps me to know what you're thinking better. You can also use the chat box. We would just appreciate your feedback so that we know what you're thinking and doing, and just make sure you're participating. So thank you very much for being here. You're going to learn that Marzanos says that one of the things we should do is set the objective, that children learn more when we set the objective. Well, it turns out so do adults. And setting the objective means more than just providing an agenda. It's what we really want people or students to know, understand, or be able to do at the end of a lesson. So for today, what are our goals? What are our learning objectives? We want you to learn strategies that you can implement immediately in any subject area. So if you're a math teacher and you think, I don't know how I would use that math strategy, let me know in today's meet and we'll give you some examples. We also want to talk about how you can use these strategies to implement the response to intervention processes. If you're referring a student for special education testing, you know that the evaluation requires that you put in what strategies you've used with the child. All of these strategies I'm presenting tonight have been proven to be beneficial to students. So if you have these strategies in your lesson plans and you use them, then when you go to fill out those forms, you can say, you know, I set the objective with the students and they're still not learning. I used identifying similarities and differences in 3 different ways. They still aren't learning the material. So using these strategies is very helpful for the RTI process. We also want to help you to improve student engagement. We all know students learn more when they are engaged in the learning tasks, and these tasks will help your students to be more engaged. So those are our goals for today, and hopefully after 45 minutes you'll say, yes, we reached those goals. We're going to start with a poll. The 9 essential strategies are listed there in no particular order, by the way. And we want you to click either A, B, or C. to let us know how frequently you already use these strategies, if you use them at all. So we'll compare you to the earlier group and let you know where you stand in relationship to them. But if you could right now use the poll and click either A, B, or C to let us know how frequently you already use these strategies. If you use them, that will help us to know how to tailor this webinar to meet your needs. So please go ahead and do that. I am thinking that you probably use them at some point right now. Okay, we're going to close the poll. We'll see where you're at on this. Oh, great. We have 48% of you use at least one of them every week. 8% of them use one every day. That's great. And 43% of you rarely use the strategies. So that tells us a lot. So I appreciate you participating. In the earlier group, we had more people who use them on a regular basis. So that's very good information for me to know. So we're going to go through them now. These strategies are research-based. What Marzano, they're called Marzano strategies, but I don't think that's really fair because he didn't invent any of these strategies. But what he did do is look at their research to find out which strategies worked best with children, with all learners. And the research that he reviewed, and he reviewed several studies, thousands of studies, we found out that when we use identifying similarities and differences, that children can learn up to 45% more of the material. That's amazing. We do a good job with that, identifying similarities and differences with younger children. If you just want to think about Sesame Street, and one of these things is not like the other. And sometimes we quit using that strategy as children grow older. But we know even with adults, even with us, who are hard to teach sometimes, teachers and principals, that children learn more, and so do we, when we use identifying similarities and differences, because we know that means that we're going to hook into your prior knowledge, and we know that the brain works better when we do that. So that's something for you to think about there. So these are all percentages that Marzano discovered how much children learn, how much more children learn when we use these strategies. That's why when you complete those RTI forms that say what research strategies have you used or what best practices, if you put down these, you know exactly how much learning, more learning will occur if you use these over other methods. So hopefully that will be helpful information to you when you're planning your lessons. So let's talk about identifying similarities and differences. Think about it. Children learn almost twice as much when we use this strategy. So for us not to use it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it's kind of like saying, well, we've chosen to be less effective today. We're not going to use something that works. I don't think any of us are like that, but sometimes we're not purposeful in our planning. So hopefully this will help us to be more purposeful. So there are many, many different ways to help children identify similarities and differences, to hook onto that prior knowledge and think how this new knowledge is like what I already know or how it's different. So we're going to talk about 4 ways. We're going to talk about graphic organizers, comparison matrix, analogies, and then the continuum of similarities and differences. The first thing with the graphic organizers, the easiest one I think to use that everyone's familiar with are the Venn diagrams. And I will tell you right now, if you teach little kids or if you teach middle school kids or high school kids, if you simply use 2 hula hoops, it's more interesting. It engages students more, and students can write their answers on Post-it notes, or you can hang them so they're right in front of your whiteboard and you can write on them. But hula hoops are wonderful Venn diagram makers, just so you know. Here I'm comparing the 2 gospel versions of the nativity story. I'm comparing the Gospel of Luke with the Gospel of Matthew. And even though these Gospels never contradict themselves, they do tell different versions of the same story. So what they have in common is in the middle, and then on the outside edges are how Luke and Matthew differ. Venn diagram works really well because we have both the similarities and the differences. Sometimes we do one or another. The Venn diagram lets us do both. If you will notice on that list of strategies, I'm going to go back to them. Technology is not on there, okay? And yet we all know that technology helps to engage many students. But technology is not on there. So we're going to talk about these strategies, and sometimes we're going to talk about them in terms of technology and sometimes not. Here's how we can use a Venn diagram with technology, and this is a free app. It's Kidspiration. It comes available for iPads and all different kinds of devices. But remembering that technology itself isn't a teaching tool, it's how we use it. And this is one way to use the technology well in order to help children organize and classify information, to have them to compare and contrast. And there in the on this one, they compared a tornado with a hurricane. And again, Venn diagram is better than some of the others because it gives you both how they're alike and how they're different in a visual format. A comparison matrix is another wonderful way to compare the four Gospels. You can do it this way. If you want to differentiate, you could ask children to use a Venn diagram or a comparison matrix to compare the Gospels, or you could ask them to write a narrative. All three ways will help you to know if the children know the differences between the four Gospels. I'm going to tell you it's Christmas. You don't maybe have time to grade long narratives, long paragraphs. So maybe you want to use a Venn diagram, or maybe you want to use a comparison matrix. Again, you can differentiate this, which makes it a better strategy even yet. And it's also appealing to visual learners. And you can use computer software or apps to do it, or you can just do it with pencil and paper. But again, all of the children are engaged in the learning task. The learning task helps to increase learning achievement, and it can be used in multiple ways. So that's one of the biggest things that you should consider looking at any strategy. Can I differentiate it? And you can easily differentiate this one. Analogies. Analogies are used in literature. They're used all the time. We want you to help children to write analogies. And if you have preschool students, start writing analogies as a group. You can do it. It's best to start with large group, and then we go to small group, and then ask individual students to write analogies. You can do it by asking questions, how are things alike and different, and then writing a sentence about it. You can do it by doing a fill in the blank. Life is like a, and then blank, and let the kids fill in the blank. So you can say a dog is like a cat because, and that's the first step. Or a dog is to cat as an elephant is to blank, and then the students fill in the blanks. You just need to start small and build it up together, okay? Start out with whole group analogy writing, and then small group, and then individual. Preschool, kindergarten, you can do whole group the entire year. If you send them to kindergarten, first grade having already done that, or kindergarten having already done that, when they get there, then they'll be able to go to small group, okay? If you're starting with fifth graders who haven't really done this much, start with whole group, and then small group, and then for the individual ones. Sometimes we think of analogies with vocabulary. That works too. But we need to remember that with analogies, we're trying to compare and contrast, or seeing how they are like or how they're different, and that helps the students to learn. Let's talk about summarizing and note-taking now. Summarizing and note-taking increases learning up to 34 percentage points. That's pretty amazing, okay? When we're talking about summarizing and note-taking, we need to understand that we need children to evaluate, and that's the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy. Sometimes we think kids should be able to summarize very quickly, and the truth of it is it's a high-level task because they have to evaluate information and determine if it's relevant or not. That's difficult for adults, let alone children. So what are some easy ways to do this? Well, first of all, with the summarizing, how about having them make a PowerPoint, but they only get 3 slides, or 2 slides, or 1 slide? One great review tip is each child gets 1 slide, and they have to summarize what they learned today, or summarize what they learned in this lesson, or in this unit plan. And each of those PowerPoint slides becomes one large PowerPoint that you can then hand to the students for review. It makes a great review tool, and the kids have written it. You've checked it. You made sure everything was okay, but they've done most of the work, which makes it better. The other thing when you're summarizing is you need to understand that most kids have too much information in their summary. So you can give them questions and let them answer who, what, when, where, how, why. That's a good way to start summary. They can answer those questions. It says, I have a question. Do you think preschoolers could understand concepts presented with a Venn diagram? And the answer is yes. And I know it firsthand experience because back in the day I've taught some preschoolers and they totally get it. They like it. You can also consider using Twitter or social media. Twitter, you get 140 characters. This is a school in Omaha, Nebraska, and Barb Gilman is the teacher. It's 3rd grade. And Barb has a Twitter bird because the students don't actually tweet, although there are a lot of Catholic classrooms that do tweet, and I follow them on Twitter. So think about that. That's a great way. But the students write their summary on each of those post-it notes, 140 characters or less. Again, if you can make it put down into 140 characters or less, you've had to evaluate what's most important and then move forward and write it down, 140 characters or less. If you want to use Facebook or fakebook.com, fakebook.com works too. It's a fake Facebook. There's a limit to how many sentences you can have. On our Today's Meet, it's 140 characters too. But you could have a Today's Meet for every day of your classroom. And students could write their questions, they could write their, and you could answer them, they can put down what they've learned. All those things can go on this one Today's Meet. And then your students have really written a summary of the day. They're getting that practice, they're evaluating what's important to put down, and the parents can go there and see what they're learning. So I think that that's an easy way to do things using Today's Meet or Twitter or Facebook or Fakebook. And again, if you're worried about actually being on social media, you can do it like Barb did it. You make the little Twitter bird, and then you put those Post-it notes on there, and it looks lovely. If we're going to take notes, technology's helped us a lot. And it's amazing because everybody can record anything now if they have a phone, basically. There are all kinds of apps. The SuperNote app I like because it's free. Somebody told me last time in the last session that it's free for like 6 or 7 recordings and then you have to pay for it, but it's still very cheap. But the great thing about it is the students can type notes while it records the lesson, or they could write notes while it records the lessons. It gives you those options, and it is an app for iPad. The other thing I would say is sometimes people are afraid to let them record because they want to make sure they write notes. For some students, they literally can't do 2 things at once. So they can't think about what you're saying and write at the same time. The other thing is, think about it. When you were in college, if you recorded notes, and most of you are probably too young, but back in the day, it was a big deal to record notes. But I never did it because I didn't want to go back and listen to them. I didn't want to, you know, I thought about, if it's an hour-and-a-half class, do I have an hour-and-a-half to go back and listen to it again? So again, it's helping students figure out, evaluating the material, what's most important, what do I want to write down what the person says. If you go into any college classroom, if you go into any 8th grade classroom, kids write down different things. They don't know how to determine what's most important. So really when you're teaching kids to take notes, you're teaching them how to evaluate. It's a tough skill, so please, please make sure that you give your students enough time to learn it and give yourself enough time to teach it. Okay, so we've done identify similarities and differences and summarizing and note take, and now we're going to go to reinforcing effort and providing recognition. And I have a different take on this than Marzano. Marzanos talks a lot about academic achievement when we give students kudos for working hard, when we say great job, good job. And I think adults respond that way too. And here we have a picture of one of our principals who won a blue ribbon. I bet you didn't know her school won a blue ribbon, but that's why she's in blue. And we had a breakfast and we honored the schools that won the blue ribbons, and it was a great thing. It was a great thing. They so appreciated the fact that we took time to honor them and gave recognition. And kids are the same way, but it can't be fake recognition. They know the difference when everybody gets a trophy or only a couple of people get the trophy. You know which trophy matters? The ones only a couple of people get. That's what really matters to them. The recognition has to be real and has to be for doing something really important. I think that one of the things that you can do that's easy is ask your school secretary if she would give you address labels for every child. and then put them on a postcard, put them on a card in an envelope. By the end of the year, all of those have to be sent. So you have to send the children notes about maybe they did something good that you saw, maybe they did a great job reading at Mass, maybe you caught them being kind to one another, whatever it is, but provide them with some affirmation and some recognition of their effort and their work. I think that if you are a new teacher or if you're an old teacher who needs a new idea, is to call your parents of every child and let them know what they've done well or right. If you spend your first 2 or 3 weeks of school, and if you haven't done it, do it now, but if you spend 2 or 3 weeks calling every parent, and yes, it's a pain, do that. Then when you have to make that call because the child hasn't done something well, you've already made a good call before the bad call ever have to go. It will save you hours of time because you've already set the tone because you called them because the child was doing something well. I used to do that, and parents would be like, oh, I was afraid, I wondered what they could have done wrong. They never expected someone to call to give them good news. So take the time to do that. That's really important. I'm a very proud aunt. I am so lucky to be Carolina's aunt. And this is from her teacher, and it's her progress report, and it's a great thing. But just go to the last paragraph, because I think if we could all write something like this about our students, it would be a great thing. Maybe we can write this about our students during Catholic School Week and let them know how much we appreciate them. But she said, let us give thanks to God that Carolina is who she is. Let us exhort her to continue being who she is, and let us be available to her whenever she needs extra support, encouragement, or simply a kind word. It is a blessing to have her as a student. You know, that's great. That's a great thing to say. And I think that we feel that way about all of our students, that they are blessings, but sometimes we forget to say it. So take the time to say it, because when we do that, we're talking about the whole child. We're different from public school educators, and that we are trying to educate that whole child. And when we recognize that whole child's efforts in whatever it is, then we're making a difference. And when we recognize those efforts, it makes it much easier to have those difficult conversations because we took the time to notice what the child did well or right or what is good. And remember, they are a blessing. I know sometimes they're not in your estimation at the end of a long day, but most of the time you will agree with me that our kids are great. Okay, we're going to put a little pause here, and you can write this on today's Meet or in the chat box, but I want you to take a minute and I want you to think about the first 3 ones: identifying similarities and differences, summarizing note-taking, and reinforcing effort and providing recognition, and think what I currently do so we can share with each other, or what I'm going to do in these 3 areas, because these 3 areas increase learning by as much as 45%. We have to look at how can we use these strategies. So I'm going to give you about 60 seconds, 90 seconds to do that. So go ahead. And if you're with each other, talk. If you're all alone, talk to yourself, or better yet, type it in today's Meet. Go ahead. Somebody likes the Twitter idea for summarization. Someone else wants to be more aware of the power of reinforcing effort and providing reinforcement. I know, it's so easy to forget that, isn't it? But if you think about it, it makes sense because it shows the kids we care, and that's what matters to them. Someone else said I've used the hula hoop idea and it works great. It really helps the kids because it's a visual. Someone else uses Supernote app. That's good. Oh, but their school has a lot of rules against using phones at school. Now, as schools, we're going to have to look at those policies. It's a tough one. Because I know adults, when I present, They're totally on their phones when they're not supposed to be. So, you know, if adults do it, what do we expect of kids? PE teacher says, I need to send home notes for positive reinforcement. Yes, please do, because for some of the kids, that's where they excel, is in your room. So someone else said they've not used today's meet to summarize, but they could do it that way. Absolutely. Evernote's on the iPads works well. That's a good note. Evernote is another good app. Well done, everyone. We're going to move forward. Homework and practice. What's more Catholic than homework? You know, I think sometimes we think we invented it. Helps kids learn. 28% more learning occurs when we have homework and practice. Look at my first sentence there. No child will ever be deeply invested in a worksheet. Worksheets are usually not about learning, they're about getting done. Now think about that. All the kids care about is if the worksheet's done. They don't care if they learn a thing on it. So let's turn that upside down a little bit. And the way I like to do that is with questions, because I think questions are better than answers. I think you learn more when you have more questions than when you have more answers, or at least that's true of me. So the homework is you give the answer and the kids have to write the questions, because writing the questions is more work. So let's say you're going to give them a math worksheet, 20 problems. Instead of that, why don't you give them this? Say the answer is 5. Write all the math problems you can where the answer is 5. Now, some kids will say, well, how many do we have to write? And you're going to say, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll give it the top 5 people, maybe I'll give them all 10 points tomorrow. So if you have 5 kids, if you have 25 kids, the 5 kids are going to get 25 points tomorrow because the top 5. So if I have a child with 100 and a child with 90 and 85 and a child with 2 and 7, who's going to get them? The ones with who wrote the most questions. You could say everybody gets a half point for every question they write. You could say everybody gets 1 point. I don't care what you say. You're the teacher. You get to make that up. That is the beauty of being the teacher. You get to make it up. But having the kids write the questions is better than having them write the answers. Because if you do it that way, think of how many math problems they're going to do. And you're going to have some kid write 1 million minus 999,995 equals 5. And that's going to be more math than they've thought about if you gave them 20 worksheet problems. So questions are better than answers. So here's another one. You guys can write this on today's meet or in our chat box, but here's the question. The answer is Jesus. What are the questions? Go ahead, write some questions for the answer is Jesus. The answer is Jesus. What are the questions? Who is the Messiah? What name means God saves? I love it. But kids are going to come up with more questions. They will do more homework this way, and you didn't do anything. And plus, this is a lot easier to grade. Lots easier to grade, folks. So think about that. And again, I don't care what subject or what grade level, it's better homework. If you teach algebra, the answer is 1.1. Figure out all the algebra equations you can. I know a teacher who started with the first day the answer was 1, the second day the answer was 2, all the way up to 180. That's the only homework she ever gave in math. Guess what? Her kids did phenomenally well in math because they had to think of math problems every day. So think about it. The other suggestion I'm going to make is called Flip It, Flipping the Classroom. Some of you may be familiar with it. And some of you may not be able to do this very well because your kids don't have technology. But if they do have technology, I think you owe it to your kids to do it because it is kind of the way of the future. And with Flip It, the kids watch the lecture or hear the lesson at home and then do all of the work, the homework at school. So for all of you who worry if the parents are going to do the homework, no one else can do the homework for the child if you flip your classroom. They either listen to the lecture or not. Do you have to record all your lectures? No. You can go to places like Khan Academy. There's all kinds of lectures there. And you can have the parent and the student talk about it. There are lots of little lectures on YouTube. There are things on the USCCB website that you can use about Advent. Lots of ways to flip it. But you just tell them, you know, we want you to go to the USCCB website, and we want you to read this about Advent, or we want you to watch this little video. whatever you want, but flip the classroom for homework. Not every day necessarily. In fact, I know I wouldn't do it every day. Some of you are much better than me, and you probably do already. But you can flip it for 1 day a month, 2 days a month. You decide. But I think flipping it, if your children have the technology, it's a good thing to do. The other thing about, someone said they create a wiki space in order to flip the classroom. That's a great idea. That is a very good idea. Go ahead. Dawn wrote that. Dawn, if you can put some of your ideas down there, we'll share them. The other thing about homework is it has to be purposeful, especially if you're giving them a reading assignment. What I would suggest that you do is you give the kids 1 or 2 questions tops after a reading assignment, and that's all. And you tell them, I'm giving you 1 question, so the answer better be great. And then the question has to be thoughtful, something that they have to really think about and consider, because we want homework to be purposeful. We want it to be related to their work. It's really important that we do it that way. Okay, non-linguistic representations, a 27% gain. You know, it's really amazing to me to think that our children are more visual learners than ever before in the creation of time. When I was growing up, I'm so old, we were auditory learners. But because we put babies in front of iPads and movies and all kinds of moving visual images, they are visual learners. We've created them that way, okay? It's our fault, we did it. So now as teachers, we have to deal with what we've created. So we need to look at all these things and figure out ways to do it so that children can look at pictures. When we had that Venn diagram with the from Kidspiration, that is really a picture. The Venn diagram that I created with Luke and Matthew, the Gospels of Luke and Matthew. For some kids, that is a picture. They remember that Venn diagram. They remember the words. And that's what they remember. They remember it as a picture. They don't remember it as separate attributes. And that's okay because they're learning the material. They've just learned it differently than maybe you did. We should consider using digital cameras because pictures can be taken very easily nowadays, and those are great things and will help kids to remember more. So we might want to look at pictures, using symbols, ways to help kids to remember things because they are visual learners. They are definitely creating pictures in their head. They're better at that. You need to help them generate those pictures, talk about how they do it. Maybe sometimes they have to close their eyes. The other side of non-linguistic representations are acting things out, being physical, because kinesthetic learners can also fall under non-linguistic representations. I have a question about what if homework becomes about quality? How about with homework if it becomes, I think they mean quantity, not quality. What if it becomes they want quality, not quantity. You can control that too. You can say, well, these questions don't make sense. But I'm telling you, generally the quality is higher. And what's the quality of homework if it's a worksheet? I mean, let's do and identify the similarities and differences. If we have a worksheet and they put the answers in, that's great, but they probably don't think about it very much. And sometimes you know they don't because the whole last row they just get the wrong answers because they just wrote whatever and mom didn't check it. If I give them the answers 5 and they write me 5 problems that are, you know, that are within their range, that's great. But if they know that if they write 10, they're going to get 10 points, how can they write 10 poor problems where the answer is 5? Now, if the answer is Jesus, I suppose some questions are better than others. But again, I still think writing the question is more work for them than writing Jesus as the answer. And I think they remember it better. So that would be my answer. I hope I answered it. More symbols. I don't know if you're familiar with emoji. I think it's my daughter's favorite thing in the world. But again, they're symbols, and symbols that can be used to help kids learn. So emoji is another thing to use. Another way to use technology to help students retain more information. Someone said, my students take pictures of the homework I write on the board. That's perfect. We had a meeting today, a retreat planning meeting, and notes are all over the board. I took pictures of the notes. So I didn't take one note with my hand. I just took a picture of the notes. I don't think I cheated, and I think I got all the information I needed. I would guess that I got lots more information because I thought about things as people said them because I took the pictures. So I think that's That's a great idea, and they have a camera phone, or they may or may not, but they, or you can take a picture of it with your phone and put it on a website or email it to the kids, however. Emoji is an app that has symbols of all different kinds. It's free. You can use them in emails. You can use them when you tweet things. You can just use them all the time, and kids can use them to help remember things. So that's it. Someone else said they place novels and links for web quests and online tools for vocabulary, and they do online tests for vocabulary in lieu of paper tests, and that works. Kids like it. Here's a picture, digital picture that we took on cooperative learning. I don't mean to imply I took it. Sorry, I don't mean to imply that. I did not take this picture. But the cooperative learning, we know that for the 21st century, if you ask anybody, they will say the skills for the 21st century, they always say communication and collaboration. And we spend a lot of our time telling students to be quiet. What we really need to do is to teach them how to communicate and collaborate together. So I have some rules for cooperative learning. I call them the Kathy Mears rules for cooperative learning because that's such an original title. So here's the first rule. Repeat after me. No. I didn't hear you guys, so say it again. No. That's the answer that you give when the students say, we're not finished, we need more time. The answer is no, okay? Why is it no? Because when one group isn't finished and everyone else is, you're saying that one group is more important than everyone else, which is not true. You need to ask them to raise their level of gameplay up to where everybody else is. You also say no is because giving them more time doesn't mean that you'll get better quality. You also say no because children need to learn to work under some time constraints because the world is full of time constraints. We call them deadlines, we call them time tests. Children need to learn that. So the answer is no, okay? That's your answer. The next rule is keep it short. If you're just starting out, I would say your cooperative learning lasts about 60 seconds. And you ask two kids to get together and tell each other what they've learned today. Or you ask two kids to get together and say, the answer's 5, give me 3 problems each. And they tell each other the 3 problems. 60 seconds is about right. Doesn't matter the age, okay? That's as long as it needs to go at the beginning. So the first rule is no, the second rule is keep it short, and the third rule is this. They can only tell you what they heard someone else say. Excuse me. So if you had someone say, if Susie Sunshine is paired with Johnny, and Susie Sunshine wants to give you her answer because she knows it's right, she's not allowed to. She can only tell you what Johnny says. Now that will frustrate Susie Sunshine, but trust me, she needs to work on her listening skills. And if we're going to let Susie Sunshine tell us what she thought, why did we ever put them together to work together to begin with? There was no cooperative learning needed. So we need to make sure that they talk to each other, they listen to each other, and they report out what they heard. For middle school kids, this is especially great because they're not responsible for the answer. If the answer's wrong, I don't own it. It was her answer. And that is helpful to kids who don't want to share. So now your most quiet child can share because they're not sharing their answer, they're sharing someone else's. So it really helps. So I would suggest that you make sure that they only report what they heard someone else say. So these are all rules for cooperative learning. So you say no, the answers are short, the short time is short that they work together, and then they can only report out what they heard, not what they said. Because again, if they're going to tell you what they said, there's no reason to be cooperative. Okay? So that's what's important. I have another question about how do I feel about weekend homework. I feel like sometimes it's a good idea and sometimes you don't need to do that. That's what I think. I think it depends on what you're doing in your classroom, what they need to do at home. I don't have big rules about homework or anything. I just, I kind of go with the flow, and if it makes sense that they have weekend homework, then they have weekend homework. Do I think they need it every weekend? No. Do you like homework every weekend? I bet you don't. So I think just treat them like you want to be treated, and I think it'll be fine. Again, I don't have a hard and fast rule. So setting the objective, I talked about this at the beginning. That's more than an agenda. What do you want them to know, understand, or be able to do at the end of this lesson or the end of this unit? 23% gain when we set the objective. It seems like something we should do, okay? Then providing feedback. And you know what? That's hard because what we know about feedback is if it's generic or vague, it doesn't mean a thing. So if you say good job, they don't know what they did to earn that good job maybe. Maybe they did, but maybe they don't. If you said, oh, not so good, we need to do this over. Do they know why they need to do it over? They know they got it wrong. But again, it's the feedback specific. We have to give them specific feedback. We have to say, when you added these two numbers together, you didn't carry. And because you didn't carry or because you didn't regroup, whatever terminology your school's using, you got this incorrect, okay? If you say, oh, that is beautiful handwriting, I love the way you made your J's, they're going to go home and tell mom, hey, my teacher said I like using the J. So again, very, very specific feedback is helpful to students. So you need to do that. I've used toy telephones for cooperative learning with preschoolers. The phones challenge the children to be better listeners. It's a good idea. What did you hear on the phone? I like that. Okay. Generating and testing hypotheses. Again, we need to make sure that we provide children with real learning experiences. We need to give them a problem and see if they can solve it. And you shouldn't have a preconceived notion of how the problem should be solved, because that just squashes innovation. If they do it, well, yeah, that was good, but here's the right answer. No, that was your answer. We want the kids to come up with their answers, and they need to get to have the chance to test out their answer to see if it's correct. And we need to be really careful about this. We go around telling kids, oh, it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We should learn from our mistakes. And by the way, I'm going to give you a D because you made a mistake. We have to think about our practices and what we're saying to children at the same time that we're giving them a sermon. I feel really strongly that we're grading kids too much, and I know it's because of online grading and because the parents want to see a new grade every day, but I think it's time to have a conversation with parents. Do you want a grade every day, or do you want your kid to be able to mess up sometime and it not impact them for the rest of their lives? Because I promise you, if you give them an F, they'll tell you it's going to keep them out of Harvard. So the same thing is, maybe he got an F today and I didn't put it on there. Is that okay with you? I would think they would say, okay. So, it has to be the same way. Oh, I got an A today, but you know what? I really didn't challenge him, so I'm not sure that was worth anything anyway. Because maybe they got an A because we didn't challenge him, and they got an F because we challenged him too much. So let's have the conversation about how frequently we really want to grade children in order to assess if they're learning the material. And because if we grade a little bit less, maybe they'll take more risk, because I think that's really important. There are administrative guidelines for grades. I know that. I think we all need to talk about it. I was going to write a little note, because I think that we've spent all this money for online grades, and I think we've hurt families, because now kids never have to talk to their parents about their grades. Parents can just go check it out. And kids don't have to be responsible for even telling their parent if they got an A or a B or C or D. We took that responsibility away from them. And I don't know, was that a good idea or not? I mean, I think it's a conversation worth having. I'll probably lose, but I still think it's a good conversation. Let's talk about questions, cues, and advanced organizers, okay? These are all words from Bloom's taxonomy. I love Bloom's taxonomy. I think it helps me to be a better teacher, a better presenter. If I were you, I would put these words on all 4 walls of my classroom, because I want to make sure that I use all of these areas when I'm asking questions. And by putting them on all 4 walls, I'm telling my students, these are important things. You have to have some knowledge. You have to be able to comprehend. You have to be able to apply. You have to analyze. You have to synthesize, and you have to evaluate. That evaluation, there's so much information today. Children must be taught to evaluate. So that's why I believe in teaching summarization, saying we're going to evaluate the information, and we're going to summarize what's most important. So I think that you just need to look at these words and use them to make sure that you're providing a balance, because if you ask better questions, kids will be better thinkers. The other thing is, we want children to ask the questions, because we're going to give them the answer. They have to ask the questions. This gives them words to help do that. And finally, I think that it's really important that if you can't think of anything else, we need to ask the kids why. So if we say 3 plus 2 is 5, then we need to ask the child why. See, when we say, what's 3 plus 2, and the child says 5, he thinks he's done. He thinks it's over because you're going to move on. Don't move on. Tomorrow, don't move on and say why. Just say why. Why is 3 plus 2 5? If you ask why 3 times, he will be crazy by the time you ask him the second time. But by asking him 3 times, we're forcing him to think. I have done this with adult learners. When I teach math, I say what's 3 plus 2, and the never had an adult miss it yet. They always say 5, and then I ask them why, and they fumble around, but they get out one reason. And then I ask them why again, and the room gets very quiet because no one wants me to ask them anything else either. But the reason is because when I ask that why, that second why, I'm asking you to really think, and I'm asking you to really communicate. So tomorrow, if you can do nothing else, go into your classroom, and when you ask a question, like who's the Son of God, and they say Jesus, say why. And again, you don't need the answer. The child needs the answer. And hear what the kids have to say. What season of the church year is this? And they say Advent. Why? Why does the church make at this time Advent? Why do we call it Advent? All of those why questions will ask kids to think more deeply. And that will make you a better teacher and them better learners. So use these words from Bloom's taxonomy, but just don't forget that old standby why. It's very important. Okay, someone says, it's a great conversation. What about a student who has all the responsibility and access to their own online grades? I don't understand, Kate. I'm sorry. What about a student who has all the responsibility and access to their own online grades? I know it's me, Kate, because it's almost 8 o'clock, but if you can give me clarifying information, I will work on that. We have another poll here. We've given you some strategies this evening, so can you answer this question for me, please? If you're going to use these strategies, one or more of them in the next few days, one in the next few days, one before Christmas, or sometime, some way, I might use another one. So if you could answer the poll, that would be great. Gail says, why questions drive 8th graders crazy, but they come up with the best answers and then start asking why themselves. It's true. And then the next best question is why not? So if 3 plus 2 is 5, why? And then why not? Why not's a great question too. Okay, so are you answering the question? I think we'll probably close the poll right now. What do you think, Kate? Kate is a wonderful poll closer. %, you're going to use one or more strategies. Thank you. 13% will use at least one. I'm happy. I hope it's the Y one. 4% will use something before Christmas. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. That is awesome. So, why the Marzano presentation? One, because the strategies are great strategies, and they can be used with or without technology. They can be used for differentiation. They can be used for RTI. They're great, great, great strategies. But we want to let you know that if you can be in the Pittsburgh area, he's going to present at NCEA Thursday, April 24th of our convention in Pittsburgh. We have resources for these things at www.ncea.org. You can check on the elementary. Middle school people, go ahead and check on the elementary. We have resources there for you. If you want to contribute to our resources, please do. Our newsletter is for teachers by teachers. I am constantly looking for writers. If you have something to share, strategies, ideas, some great project you do, contact me, email me, let me know, because we are always looking for people to write for our newsletter. If you don't use Twitter, think about it. I know even the word's funny, but I promise you, you can learn so much on Twitter. It is amazing to me. You can follow me at NCEA K Mears. On Saturday morning, there's about 300 Catholic educators that get together, and they talk about topics via Twitter. It's called Catholic Ed Chat. So consider joining that group, please. Thank you for everything you do. We really, 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 really appreciate you being here tonight. If you're on the East Coast, it's 8 o'clock. It's getting late. If you're on the West Coast, it's a little bit earlier, but you're probably ready to go home. I am going to take a little bit of time to answer some questions here. Someone says, don't you love middle schoolers? And the answer is yes. Someone else says, everything, even the drama, the hormones, and the person says, yes, yes. So I do too. What's not to like? Okay, the students have their ID info, so instead of the parent checking their grades, they do. And some kids do. That's great. That's wonderful. And again, we know some parents are less involved than others, and that is the way it has always been. But luckily, they have you. And so those kids who have parents who are less involved, they still have you. And all the research shows that even the strategies don't matter as much as you. You matter the most, the good teacher, and I know you're good teachers because you're taking your own time right now to keep learning, and so I am not too worried about those kids because they have great teachers, and you're going to help develop the whole child and teach them about God, so what else could those kids need? I know it'd be great if they had great parents and parents who did all the right things, but their parents are just like you and me, human. They do the best they can, so it's just something to think about. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very, very much for participating. Thank you, Kate, for staying late and helping me do this. I appreciate that very much. Today's meet will be up for a while, and then we'll take it down and put it in PDF form and email it out to you. But you guys have a wonderful Advent and an even better Christmas. Thank you very much.
And that concludes today's Marzanos Essential 9 webinar. Thank you so much again for spending your evening or part of your evening with us. And we certainly invite you to visit our website at www.ncea.org to view the schedule of future webinar topics. Thank you.